Welcome, everyone, to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion of the book Falling. This month was a really unusual month for the Girlfriend Book Club. We have over 35,000 members, and this month it was a tie between The Personal Librarian and Falling. So last night we met the author of The Personal Librarian, and tonight I'm so thrilled to be welcoming TJ Newman, the author of Falling, to join us tonight. And I have to say, this was one of my favorite books of the year. And it was because it's so rare to find a book that you start the first page and you really can't put it down. And this book truly lives up to the hype. So I am so thrilled to welcome you, TJ Newman, tonight.
Hi, Shelley. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here. And you explained sort of the voting process and how the Girlfriend Book Club chooses their books. And I didn't realize the full gist of it. And now that I get it, I am so honored. Thank you for nominating Falling.
People are raving about your book, no doubt about it. So before we start, for the few people out there that may not know what the book is about, can you just give a really quick, short summary of the premise of the book?
Sure. Falling tells the story of Flight 416, a flight from Los Angeles to New York. And what the passengers on board the flight don't know is that just before they took off, the family of their pilot was kidnapped. And he has now been told that he can either crash the plane or his family will die. So then the book follows, the valiant efforts of the crew and the pilots and the passengers in the air and the FBI and the family on the ground in their attempts to do the impossible.
So I think everybody wants to know, I know you were a flight attendant for 10 years, is that right?
Yep.
So at what moment did you come up with this premise for this book? Was it on one of those flights and you thought, oh, I could make a book out of this? Was there something that happened that you thought, this is it? I mean, how did you come up with this idea for a book? Because it's so compelling.
Yep. We're back?
Yeah, you're back, I think.
I was working a flight, a red eye. Those are my favorite flights to work. I was working a red eye from Los Angeles to New York, and I was standing at the front of the cabin looking out into the plane, and we were doing a bathroom break. So I was looking out into the plane, and in the book it describes the procedure. So I'm looking out and everyone's asleep. It's quiet, it's dark, it's cold. In and out behind me. And I have this thought that their lives, the passengers, my crewmates, my own, all of our lives are in the hands of the pilots.
Right.
And it struck me in that moment, not just how vulnerable that made all of us, but more so how vulnerable that made the pilots.
Right.
And so it was like a concept that I just couldn't shake. And so over a few days, it kind of like solidified into a more concrete actual scenario. And I was working a different trip with a different set of pilots a few days later. And I just said to the captain one day, I just threw out there, I said, hey, what would you do if, I don't know, your family was kidnapped and you were told that if you didn't crash the plane, they would die? What would you do? And Shelley, there was a look on his face and a look in his eyes, and I could tell how terrified he was.
Right.
Because I knew he didn't have an answer, and he knew he didn't have an answer to that question. And
right.
That was the exact moment that I knew that I had the makings of my first book. Yeah.
So I'm curious, I didn't have this question on my list, but so are the flight attendants typically pretty good friends with the pilots on these trips?
It depends. They can be. So the airline that I worked for, we were very small when we started out. We were a startup airline. I got on with them pretty early. I worked for Virgin America. So amongst us, like that was the culture that I describe in the book. that's the culture that I had pretty much every day when I went to work. You knew the people that you flew with, and you were family. Like I describe it in the book, like you become friends and you become family very quickly.
Yeah. So I just want to ask if you can share a little bit about yourself, where you're from. Did you always want to be a writer, or can you tell a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I currently live. From Phoenix, Arizona, and I went to college in the Midwest, in Illinois, about 2 hours south of Chicago, at Illinois Wesleyan University. And I got a degree in musical theater. So from there, I moved to New York to pursue my dream of being a Broadway star. And since we are not having a conversation about what my next show is, you can guess how well that worked out. It was catastrophic failure, and nothing came of it. And I moved back home to Phoenix, back in with my parents, and did the whole, I'm in my mid 20s, living at home with my parents. What am I going to do with my life? Thing.
Yeah.
And that's when my mom suggested that I get a job at an indie bookstore up the street, changing hands, a local indie that I grew up in. And that was the turning point. That was the point when my dream of being a writer, which, look, I'm a lifelong reader, I'm a lifelong writer, but it had always been, it wasn't something I pursued in a concrete way where I pursued like my Broadway dream, but I'd always wanted to. And you always, I think a lot of people have in their brains, I want to, oh, I'd love to write this book. I have this story that I want to tell. I mean, a lot of people are writers like that. But it was my time when I was in the bookstore, surrounded by books, shelving books, talking about books with readers and people who loved it. And that was the transformative time where I decided, no, this is a concrete goal. I want to turn my dreams into a reality. And so I started writing constantly as much as I could, but I didn't have the story. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have the book. And so I left that job to become a flight attendant because my mom was a flight attendant, my sister was a flight attendant, and I knew the benefits of the job. I knew how wonderful the job was, and I knew it would be a good fit for me personally. And I knew I would also be able to write while I did that.
Right.
So that's my extremely roundabout, a million different directions answer to your question of sort of who I am and where I sort of came to be here.
Well, somebody is asking, one of our viewers is asking, my husband is a retired air traffic controller. Did you interview controllers to get their perspective?
I didn't, it's the one, I wish I would have known. If you can give me your contact information, that'd be great. Cause I don't actually know anybody that works for air traffic controls. So, no, I didn't. What's a really funny source, that I found was helpful for ATC was there's a couple accounts on Instagram that, put like memes up and stuff like that. It's like air traffic controllers, like memes and stuff like that, which sounds kind of silly, like really. But I'm telling you, there's several like flight attendant accounts that I know, like if you want to know how we think and what we're about and what we do, then just look at our humor, look at our jokes, look at our memes, look at what we're joking about. So I kind of found it to be helpful in that way. But to answer your question, no, I didn't interview anybody from ATC, but I'd love to maybe talk to your husband on a different book. Maybe you'd give me some advice. And I hope I did right by them.
I think you did. So I just wondered if you ever actually, this is my own question, when I was reading the book, and I know that you've been a flight attendant for 10 years, have you ever experienced anything terrifying when you're on a flight, anything scary, anything not like what you wrote about, but even a moment of like, oh my gosh, I'm in charge of all these people. Like, was there anything terrifying during your 10 years as a flight attendant?
Yeah, I think luckily, as you said, nothing like what's in the book, thank goodness. But it's an interesting thing when you work in that environment. I think you're constantly aware of just how small the margin of error really is.
Right.
So even if I've got a medical situation that maybe isn't that big of a deal, and certainly when all is said and done, it's not that big of a deal. The guy just passed out and he had this and he had that. And it's fine, everything ends well, but you never know.
Right.
And if that seemingly nothing event turns into an actual event, you're in a completely different set of circumstances. So you kind of have to approach everything that comes your way with that sort of, level 10 intensity and professionalism and awareness that like, this probably is going to be fine. But if it's not, I need to be ready and focused and 2 steps ahead of it if I can.
Right.
So everything kind of took on that color, even when they weren't major events, because you never know when someone who just seems to be a little loopy and maybe is, appearing to be intoxicated, maybe they're about to turn violent, and that could be a completely different set of circumstances.
So I love the parts of the book where you talk about the flight attendants training, because I don't think people really know much about that, the average person. So I just wondered, what do you remember most about training to be a flight attendant, and what do you think the public really doesn't understand about that training?
Yeah. Initial, we call it initial, and every flight attendant, they remember initial. It is, all day, every day, super intense. We're tested and drilled, and each airline has a different way to do it. But with mine that I went through, you had to, every written test you had to pass the first time with, 95%, at minimum 95%. And if you scored below 95%, you had to take it again. And that when you took it again, if you didn't get 100%, then you were failed, like you failed out of the class.
Right.
And then we have drills that we do, and it's just an intense crash course in everything. Like there's the paragraph where Joe describes it, and that's what it is. We cover kind of everything that you could possibly encounter. I just realized my manual is right here, actually. I'm gonna show you this. Because this is actually kind of funny, because I've mentioned this before, but I've never had it near me, and it's actually right here because I was doing some research. So this is our manual, and you can see.
That's big.
How big it is, exactly. So this is how big it is. So all of this information is everything that we are, like here's how you, put a defibrillator on a child, like, all of this stuff we go over and drill and learn for weeks. And it's intense because like I said, the margin of error up there is very, very small, and it's just you and the handful of tools that you have at your disposal.
Right.
So it's been really kind of cool to see people have that view that they might not have had before, because it's not the typical view that you have of flight attendants and of aviation. And it's nice to show people,
what I was going to say is that, I think a lot of what would you want readers to take away from this, and I think part of it is a new respect for flight attendants, right? Because I don't think the general public really knows the training you guys have and what you're really capable of doing in the case of an emergency. So I thought that was really an important part of the book.
Well, thank you. It wasn't my intention. My intention was just to tell a really fun story and take people on a really fun ride. And I think that being the daughter of a flight attendant and being a sister of a flight attendant and a flight attendant myself, I don't think I fully understood how much people don't realize what we're actually there to do. So I really was just describing the job as I see it and as I know it. And to have this unintentional and unexpected sort of broadening of perspective, like you said, like every time someone says to me, I had no idea, like you said, my respect for flight attendants has increased so much.
Right.
Like, oh, that is just
wonderful.
music to my ears. Yeah.
So
especially right now, things are kind of tense everywhere and up there. It's nice to sort of get that reminder.
So was there any aspect of the book that was really difficult to write, or was there any part of it that you struggled with, or was it pretty free flowing throughout?
It was, I think the hardest part of it was getting the story that I wanted to tell told the way I wanted to tell it. I didn't know what I was doing, first of all. When I started writing this book, the only thing that I had was the concept, right? Like what I was describing when I knew, like, oh, that's the idea. That's what I need to write. I didn't know anything else. So the scene in the cockpit where Bill first learns of the predicament that his family is in,
right,
that was the first, sentences of the book that I wrote. I started there because it was the only thing that I had. I only knew what the concept was. And then I just wrote the characters in and out of their problems all the way along. And I can't tell you how many times I would be stuck and wouldn't know what was going to happen next and how someone was going to get out of something. And I'd be at work and, we'd be doing a bathroom break and the pilot would say something sort of just like in passing. And I would say, wait, what did you just say? And it would be like, wait, so you're saying that if this, then that, but what if this, then that? Okay. And all of a sudden I've got my solution to my problem. So there was a lot of that. It was kind of a fun creative process in that way.
So you have been written about quite a bit with this book, and I know that you were rejected by 41 agents, I believe, and the 42nd one took you in. So, what kept you motivated to keep submitting this proposal over and over again to the 42nd agent? How did you keep going?
Yeah. It wasn't easy. I think, remember that catastrophic failure I was talking about in New York? I think that helped get my skin fairly thick, but I don't care how thick your skin is rejection, and it hurts. And I felt every single one of those rejections. And I was very tempted with each of them to listen to the voices in my head that were saying you should stop. Clearly there's a consistent message here. And that message is, this isn't good enough. This isn't going to work. This isn't something that people would want to read. You should give up.
But I'm sure those 41 agents are kicking themselves, right?
I don't know. I'm grateful for them because they got me to my one and only yes, my 42nd submission, which was my one and only yes, and it was the perfect fit. And it's a creative partnership that has just surpassed anything I could ever hope and dream of. And the way that it's turned out has been amazing. And that's what I just kept telling myself was, I didn't come this far just to come this far. And I knew that if I gave up on 41 or 40 or 39, I would have never known if the next one would be the yes. Because you only need one. You only need one.
So were you submitting a draft of the whole book or a proposal?
So this was something I had to learn and teach myself because I knew nothing. I'd read books and I'd written one and I'd sold them, but I'd never published one. So I had to teach myself how to do this because I didn't know anybody in the publishing industry. So I literally bought a book called The Essential Guide to Getting Your Book Published. And I read it and I followed the directions. And so each agent has their own submission guidelines. Some want the whole thing. Some want the first chapter, some want 25 pages. Everybody has their own individual thing. So for each of those 42 submissions, it was also like, okay, what does this person want? They have a portal to fill out online and to submit with this. And then you submit it also with what's called a query letter, which is like a one-page letter, sort of, that's like a pitch, like, hey, this is me, this is my book, this is the idea. You want to publish it, right? So, yeah, that varied all over.
And so now Universal Pictures has, optioned the rights to this to make a movie out of this. So how does that feel? I can't even imagine. You're writing your first book and now it's going to be made into a film. And people are commenting about that in our chat right now. So they're very excited to know what's happening with the film.
Yeah, it's insane. It's crazy. It is absolutely bonkers to me that Universal bought the rights and that this could be on the big screen. Because I'll tell you what, this was I just wanted to write a book. I ultimately started out just being like, I just want to know this story. I need to know what happens to these characters. I need to know what the answer to that question is. What would you do? That was why I wrote this book.
Right.
And then once I had a complete story, I was like, I think this is good. Let me see if I can make it better. So then that started the revision process. And then there was, 30 some drafts of this book by the time all was said and done. And then after that, I was like, okay, I want to see if I can get it published. I think people would like this book. So every step along the way was just like an incremental step. And remember, tons of rejection, tons of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to bootstrap this and teach myself how to do this. So like concepts like movie deals and Hollywood like that. No, that I never dreamed that big. So the fact that it came to pass is just, I still don't know what to make of it.
So at the core of this whole the book is really a man making a choice, having to make a choice, right? So I'm just curious as to how that seems to be the impetus behind the entire book. Is a pilot, a man, a father, husband having to make a very difficult choice. I mean, how did you? I'm just curious how you came up with that part of it. Like, why did you focus on that? You know, Bill Hoffman having to make ridiculous choice.
I think that's probably indicative of just like the type of person that I am. I love those, ethical quandaries, those questions. I like to understand why people do what they do. I'm a people person and I'm fascinated by people, which is probably why I'm a writer and also why I was a flight attendant. I find people fascinating and their motivations for what they do. And so I think it just sort of came from that curiosity, that constant curiosity of like life is messy sometimes and life is hard and life is full of really difficult choices. And when we're put in a situation where the choices are difficult, that's when you really see who a person is. And I think I was just fascinated by this idea of it's about as extreme as it can get,
Yeah.
as far as you can push someone. So what is this person like in that scenario? And I think that part of the reason that this book and this concept has been so well received is that it's very easy for the reader to also go,
what would I do? Yeah.
What would I do? If I was in that position, what would I do? And I think that that's sort of, in the back of your mind as you're reading, like, okay, I see what they're doing, but like, what would I do in this situation? And I think it also works because maybe not, most readers are maybe not pilots or flight attendants, but most of them have been passengers. So it's a very relatable situation to put yourself into that world and go with it.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that probably more than half the people that read your book looked up Kurdistan on the map, of the world map. Was that bringing in the Kurds to this book? I thought was really unique and interesting. And I know that I was doing some research on their history after I read the book. Was that how did you choose to focus on that issue?
Yeah, thank you. The antagonist storyline, it was important to me I didn't want a villain that was just black and white evil. Because as I was saying before, I love trying to figure out and contemplate, why do people do what they do? And I think I do that a lot as a person with anything that we see on the news that's a negative thing. Because I think for me, things become less scary if I can understand them.
Yeah.
And so when I see terrible things happen, which happens all the time, all over the world, including in our own backyards, if I can understand it, it makes it less scary. And then maybe if I can understand it, then there's something that can be done to avoid it for somebody else or to avoid that situation again. So I think that I'm constantly looking at the world, trying to understand and trying to find empathy for why terrible things happen. Thank you. Thank you. And it was a storyline that evolved. Because like I said, I didn't want to make just a cardboard villain. I wanted it to be a fully fleshed out, interesting storyline.
Multi-layered. Yeah, I loved it. So a lot of people are asking what authors inspire you. What's been your favorite books of the past year, 2 years, maybe?
I read across all genres. I think it's so helpful and so important to get different perspectives. But as this book is a thriller, and I've sort of been focusing on thrillers as I've been writing this. And also I realized too, I feel like as you get older, you realize like, look, my time is limited. And so, I'm not going to be able to read everything that I want to read and watch everything that I want to watch and experience everything I want to experience. So you got to be a little bit more deliberate about, what stories you bring into your life. And I have discovered over time that it's like those thrillers, those like page turning, cannot put them down, just have to barrel through them. I love them. Those are my stories that I want to read, the movies that I want to watch. And I think it goes back to all the way back to like Michael Crichton. When I read Jurassic Park and watched Jurassic Park for the first time, I think that was when I discovered like, oh, I love these stories. I love these just escapes, because that's what I love. That's what I wanted to do with this story. Was I just wanted to bring people an escape. And I think it was convenient that it came during 2020, a time when it was like, we could all use a little somewhere else since we weren't anywhere else.
Yeah, I read your book in one weekend, so it was a great escape.
I love how fast people read it, apparently. I'm a slow reader myself, so when I hear people are like, oh, I started it and 4 hours later I finished it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so impressed. How do you do that? But I love that. I love that reaction and that response, because
you just couldn't put it down. I mean, it was amazing.
I love that.
So what do you like to do in your spare time when you're not reading and writing? What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I love baseball. If I can go to a baseball game, that's I'm happy as a clam. The playoffs are, going on right now, so I'm super into that. I love to hike. I love to hike into camp. I love to travel. Those are kind of like that's my big three: travel, hiking, and baseball.
And you're working on another book, as everybody's asking about right now.
Yeah, right. Working on my next one. As I was saying to you before this got started, that it's like that's all I'm doing all day, every day. It was actually really nice to have the excuse to like wash my hair and do my hair and put on makeup and real clothes, because it's mainly just me in front of my computer all day, every day, trying to focus as hard as I can on making another story that's going to be just as exciting and entertaining as this one.
So when can we expect to see the movie version of this book? Any idea?
I've been sworn to secrecy on just about everything pertaining to the film. Yeah. And again, it's like, if I didn't, I should probably try to find like the essential, in the way that I found, the essential guide to getting your book published. I should find like the essential guide to understanding the film industry and how movies get made or something, so that I can have some idea of what's going on.
So I know I just one more question. So I know your mother was a flight attendant, right? Mm-hmm. Is that right? Yep. Your sister, I believe. So did they have any input into this book, or did you send it to them before you submitted it to agents, or, are they so proud? I'm sure they're wildly proud of you right now.
Oh, wildly proud of me. My mom read probably every draft of this book that I wrote. I gave it to 3 people after I wrote the first draft, and she was one of them. And like I said, she's been there since day one. It's funny, we were actually just talking about this last night. I did actually, though, when I was writing this book, because I didn't tell anybody I was writing this book.
You just did it.
Yeah, I just didn't. I didn't want, it was, again, I came from a pedigree of failure. So I was like, you know what, for this failure, I'm just going to do it for myself, and no one needs to know, and just set yourself free.
I read that you didn't even really tell any other fellow flight attendants either that you were working on the book, right?
Oh yeah, not at all. Like initially when I wrote it, my family didn't know, but all the way up until like the point of announcement, nobody knew. Like very few people in my life knew that I was doing this, or this was, a possibility. And it was actually kind of funny, because when the announcement went public, which was a big deal, it was in the Hollywood Reporter and was around and stuff, like I had very dear, very close friends and family who were like calling me and writing me and being like, oh my God, this is incredible. We are so proud of you.
That must be so nice.
Wrote a book? Yeah, but then they were like, wait, but what is this? So like, you wrote a book, like we don't get it. What is?
You didn't tell us anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. What is this double life you've been living? So, and that's how it was, initially. Like I was saying, when my family only found out I was writing a book at all, when I basically had to, stave off an intervention, because they were like concerned I was, I don't know, doing something, double life in some sort of way. I'm like, double life, but I'm just writing a book. Just like, leave me alone. I'm fine. Just let me be in my place by myself. I just need to concentrate. So yeah. So my mom didn't even, I didn't ask for input, nobody's input for the first draft. I wanted to get the story myself. I want to answer the question for myself. And after I asked that first pilot and found out that there wasn't, like an answer to this question, I didn't ask any other pilots because I just wanted to know for myself what do I think would happen? What would I do?
Yeah. So do you have a favorite author? I just have to ask that because many people are asking, who's your favorite author? Sorry.
My favorite author, I think, because her books have just always, I don't know, they've just always touched me in a way and just hit different like emotional centers that other authors just haven't been able to hit. And that's Barbara Kingsolver. I haven't, all of her books. Yeah. They just make me, every time I read one of her books, it feels like I'm putting on like a warm blanket and just being wrapped up. I love them.
Well, we're out of time, unfortunately. So thank you so much to TJ Newman. If you haven't read, I'm going to hold it up here, Falling, you've got to buy it. It's a quick, beautiful read. You'll love it. You won't be able to put it down. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I so appreciate it. I just wanted to note that next month on November 16th at 7:30 p.m., I'm having a talk with Heather Weber, author of Midnight at the Blackbird Cafe. And then our December book is Apples Never Fall. I'm hoping to get Leanne Moriarty to join us for that discussion in December. So all you book club members, stay on the book club Facebook page because I'm hosting about 6 conversation starters for you guys to talk about the book amongst yourselves. Everybody loved it, though. Falling was a magnificent book. So thank you so much. And I can't wait to see what you come up with next. And for the movie version, I can't wait. So thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, everyone in the Girlfriend Book Club. This was really, really fun. And I really enjoyed this. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. It was so nice to meet you. Thank you.
Likewise.